Comscore as a company has been focused on really solving today's core challenge for the TV and video industry. There's been a massive rise in cross-platform video and content consumption. And over the past several years, you know, we in the industry has clearly seen how video has ultimately escaped the TV set, and consumers really choosing how they want to watch and what they want to watch wherever they want to do it. And, you know, one of the core challenges is, you know, how do you build measurement and how do you define and follow the consumer as they migrate and as content migrates across, and to be able to really have data that represents the real way that audiences are behaving today. And it's not just, you know, the extension into computers or tablets or mobile devices. It really is an extension across all devices that are really in play for consumers. Gaming consoles, tablets, mobile devices, connected TVs, and ever smarter TVs. And it's also linear content and on-demand and over-the-top and streaming, creating some real challenges in terms of how we need to analyze cross-platform behavior and ultimately focus in on getting a person-centric view into TV and digital consumption to really make better decisions as we go forward. For example, just in the past 2 years, we have seen video viewing on desktops increase by almost 80%. That said, TV remains a massive part of the video viewing world, and there the dynamics are clearly and rapidly changing. But bringing together TV and digital measurement is ultimately crucial to providing a unique view on the full ecosystem. And that is critically important to be able to allow the industry to understand the real marketplace and to fully leverage all the opportunities that exist in today's media world, both for buyers as well as sellers of media. And while we've seen that nearly 80% increase in desktop video viewing, clearly that's only part of the story. As this information here shows, desktop accounts for less than 60% of digital time spent with TV properties. Over 40% of all digital time spent with TV properties is through mobile devices. And that provides you the macro view, but let's look at what this actually means in terms of the reach potential and the reach opportunities beyond television. And here we're looking at 4 different networks. Networks 1 and Networks 2 are both broadcast networks, and Networks 3 and Networks 4 are cable networks. Let me just focus you on network number 3 for a minute. 80.6% of people who consume that content viewed it on television. 10% access their content on desktop, but not on a television set. And a further 9.4% access on a mobile, but not on TV or desktop. So clearly by taking advantage of the opportunities within the digital space to extend the reach and the opportunities, you know, and if we're not doing that, we're clearly missing some real audience potential in that. Similarly, when we look at Network 4, we see 21.2% and 14.7% consuming that content on desktop and mobile and not on television. But it's not just about the reach potential. There's more to it than that, and we have continued to see in the data that we've looked at the increase in TV engagement and time spent across the way people consume content. And here we're looking at an index of the average TV minutes per viewer per day averaged across the big 4 broadcast networks. Now what we see is that people who consume the content on TV and digital spend almost 50% more time with that content. And that's a pattern that we continue to see not just in the broadcast network space, but also in cable. And here we're looking at a specific cable network as an example of what we've seen and what we continue to see as we look at the data. Here we're looking at average weekly cable network media usage in hours and minutes. The average adult spent 2 hours and 45 minutes with this cable network on TV and digital media in the average week. But again, as we see here, more platforms equals more time in total and on each platform. So consumers who consume the content on TV only spend about 2 hours and 41 minutes with the content. When we look at consumers who consume this content on TV and one additional platform, that TV time spent goes to 3 hours and 30, and then we see the digital component. And as we continue to grow and see people spending more time across more platforms and consuming this content across more platforms, the actual time spent continues to increase. Again, that increases for television, but also in terms of their multi-platform consumption. So it is not a zero-sum game at all. It is actually incremental in creating new and growing opportunities for the advertising community. Clearly, consumer behavior has changed. But in a lot of ways, the campaign goals that exist and continue to be focused on haven't necessarily shifted. So regardless of which categories we're looking at and brands we're looking at, ultimately, we need to get messages in front of enough people, enough times, to ultimately make sure that we're influencing the behaviors of these consumers and ultimately driving business growth across the brand. And in a lot of ways, the fundamentals of media planning remain much the same. We still use reach for large brand campaigns to drive awareness and garner attention for new products or services, and we ultimately need to be able to balance reach and frequency in an intelligent and useful way to drive brand goals. So for example, where we're looking to drive penetration and brand growth, we might have a focus more on reach. On the opposite side of the spectrum, we may need to be thinking about driving brand loyalty and repurchase behaviors where we need to focus on frequency. And by combining TV and digital together and being able to work to optimize the mix across those platforms together, we're able to ensure that we can achieve our brand and campaign goals in what we do in the marketplace. What ultimately do we need to know to create the ideal cross-platform media plans? 3 key questions. How many, which means understanding the unduplicated audience reach. How often, understanding the frequency of exposure, as well as understanding how long and time spent across platforms, so that we really understand the opportunities and can fully take advantage of how people are spending their time and put messaging in front of them at the most opportune times. So how do we actually do it? Let's look at a few different examples and some analysis that we've done over the past few weeks to help take a look at the ways that we can actually use data to create better and more focused cross-platform media plans. Here's an example where we looked at, we started with a brand's television campaign in the telecom arena. And you can see on the left, that's the TV-only campaign running on VH1, BET, and ABC, which generated a 236 million reach. Using that as our starting point, and with a goal of being able to grow market share in a mass commodity environment among a very broad target, the goal here was to be able to increase reach by extending the audience exposure to the advertising within the digital environment. And by looking at and adding in CNN.com, ESPN, and Yahoo sites into the mix, we're able to increase that reach from 236 million of TV only to almost 314 million, a 33% increase in reach. Equally important, if I draw your attention to the orange color, that is the overlapped audience, people who are being exposed in TV and digital. So not only are we able to add incremental reach at 33% more, but also being able to touch people and expose people in multiple environments to also be able to help enhance frequency as we're building reach as well. But that's when there's a reach goal. What happens if we're talking about frequency, where we really want to be able to drive loyalty among a particular target? And here's a similar example, starting out with a brand television campaign and thinking about how we can use cross-platform information to really hone in on that target and increase the frequency of exposure of our messaging in a TV and digital combined environment. So again, similarly to what we looked at before, the starting point was the television plan, Comedy Central, MTV, ESPN, and TNT, and then being able to layer in the additional web properties like MTV, MLB, and ESPN Digital to be able to increase our overall exposure here. Again, we have a tightly defined target, millennial male sports drinkers, and really the goal here was to double down on this target, increase their cross-platform frequency. And what we see here with this package in particular, 26% of the people exposed to the campaign would be exposed on both TV as well as digital. So being able to not just extend reach, but really use cross-platform to drive frequency of exposure in multiple touch points. In this example here, the advertiser's TV plans are exactly the same. So on the left and the right, the purple, it's the starting point is the television, and they are the exact same schedule, ABC, Weather Channel, and A&E. Now, depending on the alignment of the digital properties of TV networks, the impact here in terms of what digital can add from both a frequency and a reach perspective changes. The total reach increases slightly on the left-hand side, but we see, again, looking at the orange bubble, we see the dramatic gains here in the overlap between two properties, ABC and ABC Digital, and the Weather Channel and AccuWeather Digital being added to the mix. The key takeaway here is that we need to diversify the media mix across channels, but really thinking about the content type and the way that different properties in TV and digital environments interact, and really understanding how those things come together to be able to deliver both incremental reach as well as expose people in different environments. What this tells us is the patterns are not random, and it's not just about share shifting and moving dollars and extending dollars across platforms, but it's really being able to find the right properties and the right mix of properties to enable the best shifts and the most optimized mix of platforms as well as properties within those platforms. Now here we're looking at a similar situation, but now we're starting with a fixed digital campaign. So in the light blue circles, this digital package here on both sides for both Advertiser 1 and Advertiser 2 within the finance category, Business Insider and Forbes Digital. And those combined deliver a 21% reach. When we start to add in different mixes of television through scenario planning, what we're able to see is that different combinations of television will ultimately deliver very, very different reach numbers in terms of building onto what the digital plan started at. So on the left, we see an 85% total audience reach by layering in TNT, MSNBC, AMC, and CBS, versus a 67% total audience reach when we bring in Food Network, MSNBC, Travel, Discovery, ESPN, and FX. So again, very different scenarios by understanding what the different components are and how they add incremental audiences into the digital plan that was the starting point. And a lot of that is really about activating and planning and being able to use data to and build the insights around how do we optimize and increase campaign reach potential as well as increasing frequency of exposure across platforms. But ultimately, it's important to validate the delivery of your cross-platform campaigns and to be able to conduct post-analysis at the campaign level. So we'll now walk you through a case study sharing some results from a large advertising campaign using our cross-media campaign performance measurement. So here's an overall view of what this campaign was able to deliver. The overall campaign delivery looks at the individual TV-only audience as well as the composition of that brand exposure across multiple platforms. In the purple, 28% of people were reached by the campaign on TV and no other screen. So TV only, 28% of the reach, versus 58% of the people were reached on both TV and digital properties. An additional 5% were exposed on digital only. And this information really helps inform and understand how did the campaign perform overall in terms of its reach and frequency delivery, but equally important, how did all the pieces work together and contribute to the overall delivery of that campaign? The total audience reached of this campaign, and it was a very large campaign, was 98%. So looking at this slide, the gray area indicates the 2% of the target that were not reached. Again, in this particular campaign, you can see the advertisers not only benefited from growth and reach, but really by leveraging both TV and digital properties in their media plan to actually double the frequency from their TV-only audience targeting. As you see, the average frequency of exposure among nearly 30% of people exposed on TV only, the purple circle, was 5.4. The average frequency for people exposed to the campaign on both TV and digital was 10.5. In a very highly competitive category, brand goals were aggressive in terms of their growth. It was important to be able to bring these pieces together to not only drive the incremental reach, but also be able to drive incremental frequency across multiple touch points. And by being able to validate this campaign through measurement, we're able to ensure and understand what those deliveries actually were. Now, what does digital provide in this example in terms of incremental lift? We looked at the data and we saw that digital provides a 14% incremental lift versus television. And we're able to break that down by the individual components. So desktop only added 1.2%. Smartphone only audience was 6.3%, and tablet only was just under 0.5%. Again, you're able to see how the campaign performs and the breakdown of where reach is coming from across a real, live, in-market campaign. In a similar vein, we're able to understand how digital increases total campaign GRPs, in this case, by over 60%. The key here is that we're looking at one single unified metric here, GRPs across platform, and being able to understand and calculate the contribution from a GRP perspective across all of the different platforms and understand how they all work together to build those GRPs and impressions across the targeted audience. So some key takeaways. Absolutely critical to be able to plan TV and digital together in a single campaign and being able to look at the data together to ultimately meet and achieve reach and frequency goals. And ultimately achieving the reach and frequency goals are going to help achieve the business goals that are set forth. What we see time and time again in these data is that cross-media reach and frequency is not random. As we showed you, different combinations of properties can yield radically different audience overlaps, meaning radically different reach and frequency delivery for a particular campaign. Thinking about building reach, we can create cross-media packages that have minimal audience overlap. As we demonstrated in the data that I walked you through, there are lots of different ways to find those opportunities where we can find minimal audience overlap to build out reach when that is our goal. At the same time, we're able to maximize frequency by being able to find those media packages with high audience duplication and high overlap, to be able to touch people and expose people to brand messages in multiple environments that we know can trigger the responses that brands require. And ultimately, to create effective cross-media campaigns, you really do need to know and understand the actual unduplicated reach, engagement, and overlap of TV and digital audiences in combination through single data solutions to be able to make better informed decisions as we continue to go and live in a cross-platform environment and where we need to follow audiences and the migration of those audiences as well as the migration of content and all of the opportunities that that content and audience migration presents for the marketing community. All the data that we've showed you today is derived from our Comscore cross-media measurement products. The cross-media planning feature has been released and built on top of the audience product. The audience analysis research tool provides unduplicated audience reach and engagement across platforms. The campaign performance helps validate the delivery in market. It's an effectiveness measurement system that ultimately enables us to understand cross-media delivery across the digital and television ecosystem. These data can not only provide post-campaign reporting, but also be data sets that can help provide stronger and better inputs for understanding overall effectiveness, whether that's through single source measurement or market mix modeling measurement for campaigns. And with that, happy to answer any questions.